The next section is education and qualifications. Something I'd like to pick up on is that a surprising amount of people don't really put any information on this section. And it's actually a real shame, especially when you are at either college level or graduate level, even if you've been a graduate for 3 to 5 years. I've been a graduate for over 10 years and I still put this level of detail on this part of my CV because it's still relevant to my career. So if your education or qualifications are relevant, especially if they're relevant, then you really want to be adding this detail. A surprising amount of people just put the university and just put something like passed, as in they passed the grades and that was it. But what they don't do is confirm the date. So I don't know when you achieved it. They don't tell me what the grade is and how well you achieved it. And they don't actually tell me what the subject was. And these things are important. And you've probably spent a good 2-3 years, if not longer, of your life dedicating yourself to further education. So make sure you give it its fair share.
Good evening, Sally. How are you?
Into your iPhone's gone off mute. So this is an example of an education section. And this is a good example, particularly if you have a degree and you haven't got your grade yet, because you can see the grades that have been achieved in these modules previously. So you get a good indication of where that person's at. And you're showing a bit more detail in that level of interest, especially if this individual was going for a job that was business related and especially a HR related role. This is the kind of detail you can do with your CV. And that's a university example. I've got another example here, which is just A-levels or GCSEs. And again, a lot of people don't bother putting the grades that they got for GCSE. You don't have to put in every single GCSE. I've got 9 GCSEs written down here, and I've only highlighted the important ones, which generally is maths, English, and science. They tend to be the ones that are highly regarded. But again, if you did French studies and you're applying to an organization that has a French office, then you'd want to include that because it's relevant. So don't be afraid to expand on this detail because for you, it's really, really relevant and not that far ago that you did it. So you want to include this level of detail here. Then the experience itself. Now, so many people tend to approach their CV as a job description. I'd be interested to see your CVs and see if you've done that. So let's just say you were talking about your experience selling the Inside Success magazine. Your responsibilities may be to speak to members of the public, do sales pitches, handle transactions, attend workshops. This is a terrible summary of everything that you do, but let's just say it was those 4 things. If that's all you wrote, there is no differentiation between you and the next person. The difference is how well you did it. And that's why you have a differentiation between your responsibilities, which are the things that you do, and the things that you did really well, which are your achievements. And this can look like any of these things. So where did you add value? And that could be you improved a process. You managed to change, let's just say you were working as an internship in an office and there was a really convoluted way of doing a process and it took hours and you found a quicker way to do it because you created one document that combined everything. You've added value, you've saved time. If you've ever exceeded your targets, so if you're in a sales role and you actually have a target on your head and not only do you meet them, but you exceed them, then you want to be putting that in your CV because if you don't tell them that, they're not going to know and they're not going to know therefore that you're really good at what you do. I've got time saved there twice, apologies. But customer satisfaction is another good one. If you get great feedback from customers and it's something that happens regularly, then not only save that feedback if you get them in the form of emails, so you can keep them and show them, but things like that, that's the kind of quality that needs to go into a CV. So when you write your experience section, it's not just the company name and the date and a bit of a description about what that organization does and the responsibilities. If you're not adding in an achievement section, you're not showing how you stand out against the rest. Achievements aren't always easy to think of when you're writing your CV. So one thing I do recommend is that start creating a bit of a folder that you save in your private inbox somewhere, and call it good news or feedback or something to remember for the future. And anytime you do get good feedback, then save it in there for future reference, because it's hard to think of these things when it comes to writing your CV, and it really helps if you collect this over time. And I even do this now when I'm at work. If I ever get a response from a client saying, hey, thank you, that really helped me, or a message from my boss saying, hey, well done, that was really good, I say to them, thanks, I really appreciate that. Can you tell me what was good and how it was helpful? And you get a bit more detail about what was actually really beneficial. Equally, if you do have jobs and you have the opportunities to have appraisals, generally they're really good opportunities to get positive feedback as to what you've been doing. And it's a good place to also make a record of those things and remember that. And if you're at a point where you're also looking for your achievements and you're a bit stuck and you haven't made a record, then catch one of your favorite colleagues or your manager or someone who you trust at work and say to them, I know this probably sounds a bit unusual to ask you, but I've just been having a think, what do you think I'm really good at here? And people love to have good things to talk about, and you'll be pleasantly surprised that people probably have something really nice to say. And if that feels a bit much to ask, just say, what do you think I'm known for? If I was to say to you, tell me about that guy, what would you say about them? And it's a really good way to hear feedback if you can't think of your achievements for yourself. And there is nothing wrong with that. But by starting to create that dialogue and get comfortable asking those questions, if you can start that skill now, it will benefit you very much throughout your career. And then finally, the interest section. I don't have any examples here, but especially at your level, and I have seen CVs at internship level, straight out of school, all the way up to CEO. And interests are important no matter what level of experience you have, because it shows a bit about the person you are outside of work. And organizations are starting to become far more conscious of the kind of environment that they're creating for their employees. And they like to know that they're hiring people that are going to be a good cultural fit. So if you have interests outside of all of your experience, no matter how small or how silly it may seem, it's actually what makes you unique and makes you stand out. And the other thing is that you don't know what the reader does. And it might be that that interest is the one thing that makes them go, oh, that's so interesting. I really want to know that person because of this. A lot of CVs that I read don't have interests, and there isn't anything interesting about them. And when all is said and done, when it comes to the person that I ultimately hire, it comes down to the person I want to work with. And so if there's a bit more personality, then it really helps to bring that person and that CV alive. And the other reason why interest is really valuable is because it can be a really good icebreaker in interviews, both for you and for the interviewer. So interviewers are going to look at your CV, and they're going to find ways to try and hopefully make you as comfortable as possible in that interview. And they're going to want to know about you. And so it helps to know what you do outside of work and what makes you unique. And it can be a really nice way to break the ice and ease you into that interview a little bit more, or create a talking point at the end of the interview when you have questions. So by including it in your CV, you're inviting the interviewer in to ask about you and to learn about you a bit more. And so it can actually be a really valuable tool to help build the rapport help build the communication in your interview that ultimately gets you the job, because you're the one that's built the best connection with that interviewer. So next is what not to do on your CV. Now, before I show you the next page, please can you put some detail or some ideas in the chat of what you think you shouldn't do on your CV? Because this was a question that actually came up in the workshop last time. And I'd be intrigued to know if any of those thoughts have stayed with you, or if you have any ideas about what you shouldn't do on your CV. So please do add them to the chat. Okay, I'm not sure where my chat box has gone. Are people adding to the chat, or are you a bit shy today? Can someone jump on the phone and let me know? Okay, we have a quiet room, no worries. Oh, here we go. I can see it up here. There we go. Is 1 1/4 pages too long for a CV? Alrighty, it's a good question. I would say it's not too long, but it is important to have a full page on your CV. Sorry, can you mute your, Alexandra, can you mute your phone, please? So you want your CV to be a whole page. If it's going into a second page, but it's only filling up a quarter of that page, it just doesn't look like a complete CV. So ideally you want to either play with the margins or play with the content, and look at the white space on your CV. Does your CV look quite bare? Because if it does, you can change the format of it and put it onto one page. If it's going to go into a quarter pages on the second page, you want to fill that page out. So there's nothing wrong with having a 1 or a 2 page CV as long as it's full. Okay, so I didn't get any responses on what not to do on your CV, so I'll share it now. Things that you don't want to put on your CV. Date of birth, because a few of these fall under the same reason, because of the Equality Act of 2000, sorry. The Equality Act was basically designed to protect individuals from discrimination against protected characteristics such as age, religion, sexual orientation, ethnicity, gender, etc. So date of birth is to protect you from age discrimination. And in your instance, it's that, oh, you're too young. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, so your education's on your CV. It's probably pretty obvious how old you are. But the point is that you don't need to see your actual date of birth. It's not necessary and it's not needed in the UK for you to apply to a role. Your religion, especially, unless it's something that truly defines your identity and it's something that you would put in your interests. So for example, I've had people that support their local church, and therefore that's an indicator of their religion. Then of course that can go into your interests because it's part of who you are. But to state your religion as part of your basic facts, such as your name, your mobile number, your email address, maybe your LinkedIn profile, to add your religion in that section is not relevant. And again, to protect you from discrimination, because you don't want people making assumptions about you when they don't know you. Equally, sexual orientation, that's entirely personal to you and it doesn't matter and it isn't relevant and you shouldn't be judged on it. So it doesn't need to be stated on your CV. But again, if it's obvious through your interests and you wish to share it because it's something that makes you who you are, then if it comes through in your interest section or in some of the experience that you've done, then that's amazing and you should embrace that. But again, to state your sexual orientation isn't necessary. Equally, ethnicity, again, same thing. If it clearly comes up in your interests, either association to certain groups or hobbies outside of work, then of course it's part of your identity and you should absolutely share that with pride. But again, you don't need to state your ethnicity at the top of your CV with your contact details where this might otherwise be shared. Equally, relationship status literally is not relevant. It's more common, I find, in older people. They tend to write married or divorced, just not necessary, doesn't matter, doesn't relate to the job, but you don't need to put it here either. In each of your jobs, you do not need to write a reason for leaving. It's an interesting one because it's just not the way it's done in the UK. You will find, however, if you have moved jobs a number of times or you're in an interview, then you're very likely to be asked the question. So be prepared to answer that, but you don't need to write it in your CV. And then the referencing. You don't need to put the full details of your references because they don't need to know. They will ask you on a job offer. What you will write is references available upon request, because at least you're acknowledging that you can provide them, but you don't need to give the names of the email addresses or the phone numbers and the addresses of the references. And the reason is two reasons. A, it takes up quite a lot of space on your CV and it's just not necessary. And B, you don't want them seeking out references without your permission. And the issue is that if you do give those details, it sounds like you're saying, here's the details, feel free to reach out. And you don't want that happening if you're already working somewhere and you haven't yet resigned. So you want to keep your job search discreet, and that's one way of doing it. So those are the things that you don't want to do on your CV. And then lastly, and this did come up on the workshop last time, is to never lie. And lying can look like a number of things on your CV. It can look like exaggerated achievements. Now, there is a balance between using language that, accentuates all of the great things that you do, but you want to make the language that you use authentic to what you would say in everyday life. Because I have had it when I've had CVs written by a thesaurus, and then you meet the real person in an interview and they just don't talk like that. It just doesn't come across like it was them that wrote it. So exaggerating your achievements, especially if you were to overinflate sales targets that you've hit, or especially if you're putting in figures like sales or profits or KPIs that you've hit that you actually haven't, it tends to come out in interview. And if not, it can still come out in your referencing. And if it still doesn't come out then and you've lied and you get the job and then you don't deliver on the job because you're not actually as great as you suggested you are, then it normally ends in tears. So don't over exaggerate achievements. You still need to be honest about your achievements, because if you achieved it, that's still amazing as they are. You don't need to pretend there's something they're not. Faking your grades as well, especially faking grades and qualifications, because these can actually be checked with referencing. They can contact your university or your college and get confirmation on your grades. I actually had it about a year ago that somebody lied about even having a degree. So it wasn't even that they lied about the grades, they lied about actually attending that university. And that was just awful because we had to retract the job offer, and it was terrible because she'd already resigned from her job. And that was a really, really bad situation. Everyone felt terrible. The company was gutted because they thought they were going to hire somebody great, and it turned out it was a lie. So never ever lie on your CV. You're great just as you are.